Hello and welcome to another episode of Inside the Huddle. Today is Saturday, February 22nd. It is episode 52 of the Inside the Huddle podcast. By the time many of you are listening to this, it'll be Sunday, 2 weeks now into the off season with the Super Bowl now, 2 weeks in the rearview mirror, fully into the off season. Combine starting up this week. So hopefully we start to get some more news, get some comments from some of these GMs and head coaches around the league coming up this week when they meet the media as we continue to creep closer here to free agency and, of course, the NFL draft in April. Today, I got a couple different topics on store for you today. DiMari, another week into the offseason, and hopefully here things really start to ramp up pretty soon.
Yeah, like I said, it's been a pretty slow week, but again, we get some combine stuff later on this week, which would be interesting, especially if your team loves seeing guys in shorts, and that kind of determines on where they get drafted. But free agency here will be in soon, I think March 11th or March 12th. So yeah, I know it's a dead period, kind of we talked about, but we will have some more news and some other things once free agency kicks off, once the combine kicks off. But for now, we're going to bring what we got, even though it's not much, but we got something to talk about today.
Yeah, we got a couple different topics today. Always, sometimes a little less, but always you can find something here around the NFL, kind of a 365-day a year league to discuss. So that's what we'll do today. 3 different topics. We'll start here in the AFC East with the Buffalo Bills. James Cook made some comments this week. I feel like this time of year specifically is like the comments on podcast type of time of year where you're always getting all these players on podcasts making comments about contracts, or whether it's, Micah Parsons and CeeDee Lamb talking about the Cowboys. And we obviously discussed that last week, their viewpoint on the roster, and kind of in a way taking a shot at Jerry Jones and the way they build that roster. And James Cook this week wasn't taking a shot at the Bills, but made an appearance on Shannon Sharp and Ocho Cinco's podcast discussing where he stands with his contract. And he basically said, I would just want to get what I deserve. He feels I'm deserving of it. Like, why not? And he was talking about $15 million, made it pretty clear where he was kind of wanted to, what he kind of wants to get in his next contract and his new contract that he's searching for coming off of a very big season. It's always interesting anytime you get into a running back on a contract situation, just the way the market is. And we could be looking here at a James Cook contract that's worth, or that kind of resets the running back market, because if he does get $15 million, let's say, which is what he's asking for in this podcast, he'd be number 2 in the NFL AAV, only behind Christian McCaffrey, who's making $19 million right now. And then Jonathan Taylor would be behind him at $14 million. So he would certainly reset the market and put himself right amongst the top of the league. So I guess, what was your thoughts on this and the idea of Cook getting $15 million from Buffalo as he approaches a new contract here, entering year 4 coming up in 2025?
I don't like it. I don't like it at all. And I'm not saying the guy doesn't deserve to be paid. I think he does. He is a huge part of that Bills offense. But then again, at the end of the day, I mean, kind of say this respectfully, I feel like they can probably get anybody, not really anybody, but they can get somebody in there to make an impact. Obviously, we seen, Ray Davis this year get in there and look just as good as James Cook did as a rusher and as a pass catcher. So 15 mil for James Cook, I think, is kind of crazy considering, yes, McCaffrey makes 19. You mentioned JT, who makes 14. Saquon, who was the best back in football this year, makes 12.5. Derrick Henry, I know a little older. Derrick Henry only makes $8 million. And it's just like, in what world are we paying James Cook that much more than Derrick Henry? And you look at the two backs, which I just don't agree with. But at the end of the day, again, from his standpoint of it, it's just like, I've been consistent. I've been healthy. I am a huge part of this offense. Why not pay me? But then again, we kind of seen how that went with Zeke in 2016. And those type, there's some other factors that get into it, and those running backs get paid and they don't live up to their contract. And again, this is not me being an anti-running back guy. I think running backs obviously deserve whatever they get. You're taking body blows all game as a rusher, as a pass catcher. your pass blocking, you're protecting your quarterback. You literally do everything, and you are a vital part of offensive success. But at the
Yeah.
same time, I mean, 15 million for James Cook, I just don't see a world where I think it should happen. If he gets it, I won't be mad at it. But just looking at some of the guys behind him, I think that is kind of too pricey.
Yeah, I totally agree. You're essentially telling me or anybody, if the Bills make this move, that James Cook's the number 2 running back in the NFL. If you give him all this money, give him $15 million a year, he is not on Saquon Barkley. With all due respect, James Cook's a solid running back. He
Yeah.
had 16 touchdowns this year. Like you mentioned, he is a big part of that offense, especially since Joe Brady took over as the offensive coordinator midway through 2023 after they fired Ken Dorsey. He has certainly got those running backs involved a lot more. But I also think your point about the Bills not necessarily needing to pay a running back all that money to necessarily keep James Cook as their guy long term, because every running back that's gone through there, they've found some success. They were finding success on offense with Devin Singletary. They were finding success on offense, like you mentioned, with Ray Davis. Even Ty Johnson this season played a bigger role on their offense, which annoys the heck out of me because I wonder why this guy couldn't catch a football when he was on the Jets. But either way, he played a role in their offense. And you actually looked at James Cook's snap rate this season and carries as a whole, they actually went down. He had a 55% snap rate in 2023. This year was down to 48%. Last year, 237 carries. This year down to 207. So it was down 30 carries. Snap rate from 2023 to 2024 dropped below 50%. And I'm not necessarily saying that's James Cook. He had a very good year. I think that's just more of the Bills are more of a running back by committee type of team. And Cook had a lot of those touchdowns in the red zone, those 16 touchdowns, which of course, ranked tied for first in the NFL. But I totally agree. Like, if the Bills were going to spend premium money on a player right now, it would come at a different position. I think that either come at maybe a wide receiver, or you go out and bring in a big time edge rusher where they need that. That's probably one of their biggest weaknesses right now is Epinesa solid, Greg Rousseau solid, but they don't have that elite pass rusher that can completely change games. Is there that guy available? Do they make a trade for Myles Garrett? Do they make a trade for Max Crosby? I think you allocate your assets for that type of player than a James Cook, who is a good running back, but he's not elite. I mean, he is a 1,000-yard runner that feels like makes the most of his opportunity, but I don't think you watch James Cook like you do even CMC or Derrick Henry and Saquon Barkley and get the same vibe. He's not that every down, do it all type of back that deserves $15 million. And the Bills aren't that offense that relies on him like San Francisco does. And that's not James Cook's fault. That's just because they have a quarterback in Josh Allen that's an MVP, right? You look at the Niners situation, Brock Purdy's not Josh Allen. Jalen Hurts is not Josh Allen. Yes, he won a Super Bowl, but Josh Allen is better than Jalen Hurts. We all know that. That's not a debate. Lamar, the way he plays, that's just a running offense. Lamar's mobility is top of the league from a quarterback perspective. So I agree. It just doesn't make a ton of sense. I mean, paying $15 million for a guy where other guys can step in and produce just the same and they're not a run first team. They don't run the ball a ton.
Exactly.
Even though they ran more than they have, they're still not anywhere near what some of these other teams do.
And that was actually my next point where, respectfully, as coming from a guy that likes a team that thinks running backs aren't important and you can play without them, it's kind of hard to not, want to say pay James Cook because you see obviously in Dallas how important a running back is, a reliable running back, a running back that is going to give you consistent numbers, day in and day out. But exactly like you said, they are not a run first team. It's always been, we're going to live and die off the arm of Josh Allen, and we're going to let Josh Allen's arm open us up. And then at the same time, though, as well, as much as they do want to run the ball, they have no problem whatsoever with Josh Allen running the ball 11, 12 times a game, as long as he's not taking unnecessary hits. So for James Cook, and you mentioned that his snap share kind of being down and, his carries not being what they used to be. Again, you can find a guy that comes in there and a solid game from, let's say, a Ty Johnson, where, hey, if you can carry the ball 15 times for 70 yards and, Josh Allen can do the rest with his arm and his legs, they don't need to do too much. They don't need a downhill run game like other teams, like a Baltimore has. Buffalo also
Yeah.
really loves the RPO game. So another part of it where, again, it's not downhill. We're not running a lot of inside zone and those type of things where our pass game, our RPO game is just another development of our run game. So you don't need a great running back. You don't need a Derrick Henry. You don't need a Christian McCaffrey and that type of offense. So I'm saying that because those guys obviously make huge impacts. McCaffrey makes a huge chunk of money. So if you don't need a $19 million McCaffrey in that offense to be successful, you're not paying James Cook 15 when, again, you can go out and find other positions that they need desperately.
Yeah, I totally agree. And look, I still think I wouldn't be against the Bills extending Cook.
Yeah.
It's just not 15 million. If you tell me the Bills can get Cook for 10 million, 11 million, I think that's fine. Because you look at where that stands amongst running backs right now. Let's say Cook got 10 million, he'd be sixth in the NFL, and he'd be behind CMC, JT, Barkley, Kamara, and Jacobs, your top five. So he'd be at 6. And the category of guys he'd be around would be James Conner, David Montgomery, Ramondre Stevenson, Joe Mixon, those type of guys. I think that would be the right spot for James Cook. Like, he should not be ahead of Saquon. He should not be next to CMC, even ahead of Jonathan Taylor. But 10 million for the way he's used, is he kind of like on that, around that like James Conner type of money? Like, does that make sense? Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think he probably should make a little bit more than James Conner because I think he's better, but that's where you kind of give him 10 million. Connor's making 9.5 right now. And then Dave Montgomery is the 2 behind Jahmyr Gibbs. So yeah, I don't, you just can't tell me the Bills are, it just doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense for the Bills. That's number one. And number 2, Cook doesn't deserve 15 million. James Cook should not be the guy resetting the running back market. Who should reset the running back market should be Saquon Barkley, maybe after next year, because they can actually get out. Well, I think it's a team. I forget exactly the option, but I think they can get out next year. But Barkley will probably maybe reset the market 2 years.
Yep.
Maybe it's, who knows? I mean, we'll see. But if he continues this,
I mean, yeah, you're right on with me. I was just going to kind of add on. I mean, you said Saquon. Another one I can think of when that time is right is Jahmyr Gibbs, who continues the campaign that he's kind of on, that we could see possibly reset that market or even get close to McCaffrey-like numbers, but nobody else.
Yeah. And nothing against Cook either, but when you think of the Bills and you think you think of the Bills, it's Josh Allen.
Yeah.
When you think of the Eagles, it's Saquon. When you think of the Ravens, I think, yeah, a lot of it's Lamar, but Derrick Henry deserves a ton of credit. I think you can make the case. Look, Goff is good, but everybody talks about the tandem between Montgomery and Gibbs.
Yeah.
Talk about Gibbs maybe making that. You just don't get that with Cook. I think it'd be smart to extend him, but yeah, not 15 million.
Yeah.
That's way too much. 10 million, fine. 15, crazy.
10 to, I don't even want to say 12 because, like I said, Saquon makes 12.5.
Yeah.
So for Saquon to be making 12.5, maybe 10, 10.5, I don't see where he gets close to Saquon money.
Yeah. And I think it actually hurt the Bills if they gave him that money.
Yeah.
Because we just talked about it, allocate that in other places. Now, I would say this. If this were to get ugly, now I don't see it happening where like this negotiation gets ugly, but you do wonder if there would ever be a path for a trade at some point if these negotiations would get ugly. I don't see it again. He's in the final year of his contract, was a second round pick, so doesn't have that 5th-year option. So this is it for him. But if the Bills know that they're not bringing him back next year, even for maybe 10 to 12 million, or they know they're not going to give him 15 million, Do they look at a trade partner and say, we could still win without him like we have done in the past?
And I
Or
mean, yeah,
get to the
I
playoffs
think
without him?
because obviously, this, I feel like the running back class for this upcoming draft is not that talked about, but they do have a lot of
Yeah.
talent in this draft. So I mean, for the Bills, again, you said it perfectly. You have Josh Allen, you have the receivers around Josh Allen, which aren't your, all pro type of studs, but they do what they're supposed to do. And obviously, Josh Allen makes them better. But when you have names in this draft like Ollie Gordon and Caleb Johnson, Amarion Hampton, Travion Henderson, there's just so much talent that you can get from rounds of 1 to 4, especially when a lot of those backs aren't even first round talents. You might see them go kind of a little later. A Dylan Sampson's another one where you have a lot of guys in this draft that can instantly step in. And again, we don't need you to be a 1,300 yard rusher. If you can get me 1,000 yards, which in the NFL nowadays it's not as prestigious as it used to be. Now 1,000, you got a runner getting that in 13 games. So you can get us 1,000 yards. You can catch the ball at the backfield. You can pass protect. Anyone can do that with Josh Allen. Well, anyone can be effective doing that with Josh Allen and how they run that offense. So with the names coming out of the draft, I mean, if Buffalo can get one of those guys, late second, early third, or even 4, you go ahead and trade them because somebody will trade for them because, running backs are a huge part of the game. And there's a lot of teams that are in need of a running back.
Yeah. And you make a great point with that. The Bills are a team that can pick a running back up in the second round, day 2, and have success with them. And that's exactly what we're seeing here with Cook, 63rd overall pick, and they're having success. So I could certainly see the Bills taking that path. Even if, let's say, they don't trade Cook, I could still see them taking that path of drafting a running back this year just to have some insurance for if/when they lose Cook next year in free agency. If a team goes very big and gives him a ton of money next year, what he's looking for, especially if he has another big year and the Bills aren't willing to reach that. So it'll be interesting to follow this as the offseason rolls on, and especially throughout next season, and then really what could happen next offseason. I know that's very long time from now, but something to follow for sure. So now we'll stay in the AFC. We'll move on here to the Jaguars, who finally, I thought we were going to get to week 1 before they hired somebody at GM. Finally got their new regime fully in place. They hired Liam Cohen, of course, a couple weeks ago. Feels like ages ago now. Really, it does. Like, even, it all is kind of a month ago, but it feels like ages ago since Vrabel was hired. I don't know why, but it just does. Like Glenn, it feels so long ago.
It was so much earlier than it usually is when the coaching carousel goes on, where it's like it seems like every team had their guy, but just had to go through the steps and do other interviews.
And I think too, which was probably sped it up so much too, was I don't think many people nobody really saw the Lions, Ben Johnson and Aaron Glenn becoming available after divisional weekend. I don't think anybody saw that coming. So that was, I think that sped it up, but also gets to a point now where it's been so long, because I think you kind of went into it and we all expected, even too with the Jets, just they were looking at Brian Flores as well. And some thought that the Vikings, if they made a run, the Jets, we were looking at maybe they'd be in the Saints situation waiting for the Super Bowl. Saints, of course, had to wait for Kellen Moore. But the Jaguars, they just did things backwards. Liam Cohen was available after Wild Card Weekend. They were going to hire him, and then he went back to Tampa, said, okay, here's an extension. Then they fired Trent Baalke, and then they're like, okay, Liam Cohen gets on a plane and goes to Jacksonville and gets hired. And then a couple weeks go by, and now they've got their new GM. So Shad Khan, what are some of the quotes he's always brought up? He says, I forget this quote. If you're not living if you're not learning. What was it? Something like that.
Something
like
lines.
that. So he's always learning. He's always learning how to do things backwards. But either way, they get their GM in place. So it's James Gladstone. I'll be honest, as much as we make fun of the Jaguars, I actually think this hire has some intrigue to it just because of where he's coming from. Les Snead and the Rams in that front office is one of the most well-run front offices from a draft perspective, specifically in the NFL. The talent that they are able to find in day 2 and day 3 of the draft. Forget about just round 1, but the middle rounds is incredible. The way that they're able to stay competitive year in and year out, even after kind of going all in 2021. I know, they missed the playoffs last year, but they were back this year. And I still think the Rams are going to be a team where, even if they do move on from Stafford and Cooper Kupp this season, I still think they're going to be a team that can be competitive because of the young talent that they've got now and their ability to, in my eyes, pick up more young talent and kind of keep the, like retool pretty quickly. So we'll see if the Jaguars can do that. But James Gladstone, first-time guy. So we've seen this approach from a lot of teams. They pair first-time head coach, first-time GM. I think 2 young guys that certainly have potential. But then again, right, the Jets are in the same situation. All these other teams that hire first-time guys are in the same situation. There is obviously that unknown. We don't know what these guys are going to be. There's no track record there. He was the director of scouting strategy. So we'll see what happens. But what was your thoughts on the Gladstone hire and now the regime complete with him and Cohen?
I think you said it perfectly. We see where he came from with the Rams and what he does, and him being a big part of scouting, I think fits perfectly for Jacksonville, which not big news, but just made some headlines about wanting to build a built-in roster around Trevor Lawrence, which obviously we've seen this Jags team be 8-3 at a point of the season and completely fumble it away. So I think it's huge for, still a young quarterback to get some guys in there to be able to draft around them some and keep their homegrown talent. That's another thing.
Yeah.
So, during his time with the Rams, 4 straight division titles. They were obviously the Super Bowl in 2021. And I believe him and Cohen spent time together in LA as well from 18 to 20 and 22. So there's some chemistry there already. They know each other pretty well. And I just think for Trevor Lawrence, this is the best bet because you get a guy that we completely have seen elevate Baker Mayfield, even though Mayfield's kind of been on the up for, a few years now. But we've seen the best Baker Mayfield year this past season under Cohen and Gladstone again, Puka Nacua, Blake Corum, who I know didn't have that much of an impact as we thought he probably would, but still very solid back behind Kyrie Williams. Kyrie Williams being another one. They find talent, they develop talent, and they keep their talent, and they make runs. And I know we said it earlier this season where we're like, they're the Cincinnati Bengals of the NFC. They always start off slow, and they find the way to turn it up kind of after the bye week. And a lot of that comes from development. So I think that's exactly what that team and Trevor Lawrence needs. And you're in a very winnable division. So, I mean, it's kind of now up to the quarterback to see what he can bring to Duval this year.
Yeah, and it feels like the Jaguars are emulating in a way the Rams approach to things, right? Snead, first-time OC. Gladstone, first-time OC, similar to McVay. And now Cohen. So feels like they're kind of emulating that approach a little bit. But yeah, that's what's so important to me and so intriguing to me just with Gladstone and seeing what he can do is just look at the talent they've been able to find in these middle rounds. We mentioned Puka Nacua, of course, being a big one. Kyron Williams, being another one, was both guys in round 5, which is just crazy. I mean, you don't see that very often, but the Rams are able to do that often, which is big credit to Les Snead and everything they're doing over there. And yeah, I think when we talked about this a little bit when Cohen got hired, I think that's the most intriguing thing about Liam Cohen is you've been able to see what he can do with Baker Mayfield in Tampa for a year. And of course, how Mayfield just in general has elevated his career. But, then again, this past season, having a very successful season. And you hope that's kind of what he can do with Trevor. A little bit of a different situation. Trevor's not quite like a retread like Baker, where Baker was on Cleveland, the Rams, the Panthers, 3 teams already. Trevor's still with the team that drafted him. But I think we can all agree, biased aside, whether you like Trevor Lawrence as a quarterback, don't like him, Jaguars fan, not a Jaguars fan, he hasn't lived up to the expectations of the number 1 overall pick. He's pretty overpaid right now, if we're being honest. And he's heading in a trajectory where if they have another season coming up this year and he's not playing up to even the level we saw him in 2022 when they made the playoffs, which was, a 25 touchdown season, a career high, was a good year for him. Saw some, the playoff game wasn't, even though they won. That was because Brandon Staley's just Brandon Staley. But like if he gives you that, you could have some confidence. But if he turns around and gives you 2023, you have to have a serious conversation of moving on. Like, can this guy actually survive in the AFC and actually survive in a division that has CJ Stroud? So, and potentially the number 1 overall pick, Cam Ward, whoever that might be, if Tennessee goes that route. So, but I guess the point is, Cohen and Trevor, they've got to get on the same page quickly because time's kind of running out with Trevor in a way. I know they extended him, but you can't tell me if he goes out there next year and throws 20 touchdowns and 15 interceptions, there's not going to be talks about. There already has been some talks this year, not from the Jaguars or any rumors, but just speculation about the possibility of them moving on. You give him a year of Cohen and it's still the same stuff. Next year, you got to look at that. Like, that's it. 5 years, 1 playoff, number 1 overall pick. That can't happen.
And I kind of disagree with a point you made there, where you were saying, 25 touchdowns might be good enough for Trevor and they can make the playoffs, off that type of effort. I feel like that's downplaying it. I mean, this guy was a generational talent. That's the word they threw around. A generational talent. I just watched, who was it? I can't remember who it was last year. It might have been Baker. Last year, where you said comeback player of the year has to actually come back from something, not just sucking. So I just watched a Baker Mayfield, a Sam Darnold over the last few years completely do nothing and be able to come in and throw 28, 29, whatever the case is, touchdowns. And those were just really just bridge guys. Trevor Lawrence was a generational talent, and as paid as he is, there's no reason you're not throwing, 32, 35 touchdowns a year. Like 25 and 12, is that really a good year for Trevor Lawrence, who was a generational talent that's paid how he is? Like, he has to elevate.
Yeah. I guess it's more so that's got to be the minimum.
I can agree with.
I think you can't go into next year. 30 touchdowns is great, but you can't leave next year 6-11 and 20 touchdowns and 15 picks, or 21 and 14 what he put up in 23. I think the bare minimum, you've got to get 25, 26. But even then, though, I mean, even if he throws 30 touchdowns and they make the playoffs, is anybody really going to pick Trevor against Burrow, against Mahomes, against Allen? Heck, against Bo Nix?
No.
Bo Nix, I'd take Bo Nix right now than Trevor Lawrence.
I agree.
Bo Nix showed me more last year than Lawrence has in 4 years. So it'll be, I feel like is it with Trevor? Is it like, I guess this is maybe the bottom line. We're not going to really know what Trevor is or how do I word this? I think the ultimate deciding factor on Trevor is if they make the playoffs again, can he outplay one of these elite quarterbacks? Because let's say he goes out there this year and throws 40 touchdowns and has a huge season, but then he goes into the playoffs and can't beat Mahomes or runs into Allen. Is that going to be, I feel like that's ultimately the biggest factor, where the regular season stuff, because he's already lost to Mahomes, and if he really wants to be lived up to this contract, he's got to beat those guys and make deep runs in the playoffs, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I'm right with you. I mean, I think what you're trying. Let me see if I'm right with you, but let me see if I'm like where I'm seeing exactly what you're trying to say. Where it's like, it doesn't matter what Trevor Lawrence does this year; he can throw for 60 touchdowns. You got to beat the top guys if you want to be on the level of the top guys. You got to beat the top guys, especially when you're getting paid more than something.
That's kind of the point. And you could say, oh, well, Josh Allen hasn't beaten Mahomes. Yes, he hasn't, but he has been to 2 conference title games. He has been able to beat Lamar. Like, we can't quite just count out Allen.
And I feel like I'm gonna contradict myself here, but you look at Josh Allen in the playoffs and you just know it's gonna be a Josh Allen masterclass. In some way, somehow Josh Allen is going to perform. You look at Trevor Lawrence and you're just like, I mean, this is no different than Trevor Lawrence in the regular season, even though we are only talking about one playoff game. But people, I don't know if it's in the archives. I don't know if the NFL deleted all the tape or whatever the case is. The NFL brainwashed everyone. He threw 4 interceptions in a playoff game, and we're not talking about that.
Yeah, like, I think he's thankful that Brandon Staley was on the other sideline, or else that would be much different.
He owes Brandon Staley a gift basket every Christmas for what he was able to do for Trevor Lawrence. But and it's kind of hard to say, but then again, it's not, because we slander other guys for it. The guy was the first overall pick, generational talent, as they say, is getting paid. Was it $55 million a year, whatever the case is? And he's had 1 playoff appearance in 4 years, and he threw 4 interceptions in that game.
Yeah, and even too, talking about the playoffs, but you even look back at 2023. They were
– is that the 8-3?
And they lost 5 straight down the stretch, and he was a part, 5 of their 6 games, he was a part of those. And you look at it down the stretch, final 4 games of the season, he threw 7 interceptions. So you look at the playoff game bad. You look at last year, or 2 years ago, he collapsed down the stretch. And anytime the moment gets big, he struggles.
Even that year that they did make the playoffs, where I feel so unfortunate I was a part of the game that made that run happen, watching in person, by the way, watching Noah Brown drop that pick 6 right into, I can't remember who it was, but it wasn't like that year as well. Jacksonville was sitting at 12-5, and they were playing great football. Like, they looked terrible up until that Dallas game. They beat Dallas at home and they went on a run. So it's Jacksonville with Trevor Lawrence has never been a team where he's kind of like, they are the automatic favorites going into the season. Jacksonville's going to win at least 11. They're going to be competitive. You never know what you're going to get with Jacksonville. And the 8-3 season was the first time for them to prove us wrong, and they proved us right that they're still Jacksonville. And Trevor Lawrence has been the common denominator for all of that.
Yeah, I totally agree. So they've got their work cut out for him. Cohen's got to find the way, and he would be if there was that guy, he'd be the right guy because of what he was able to do with Baker and Tampa. But to be fair, I mean, Baker was having success prior to that. It's not like Cohen came in. I'm not trying to diminish it, but I just don't think. I think Trevor's kind of hit the ceiling here. I mean, it feels like the peak you're going to get out of him is what he did in year 2, which is, again, 25 touchdowns.
I don't know. I don't think I will ever – I can't see it, and I want to be wrong, but I don't see Trevor Lawrence being a 35-8 type of guy. I just don't think that's him. And they haven't had bad rosters. I mean, I don't think the rosters are good enough to beat Burrow and Cincinnati, Allen, those type of guys, but they're good enough to get to the playoffs. You just got to get to the dance. You just done nothing with it.
And Doug Peterson isn't some slouch coach either. He was he's a solid coach. It didn't work out, but is that more of Trevor or? It's a lot. Everybody's hands is got to be in the bucket if you go 8-3 and finish and miss the playoffs. So
the only year I'm not going to blame Trevor Lawrence
would be
was
rookie
the Urban Meyer year. Yeah, the Urban Meyer year. Yeah. I mean that 100%.
I totally agree.
All the way around.
Yeah, 100%. Urban Meyer was terrible, but and look, they deserve blame. Doug Peterson does deserve some blame, but I mean, was it all him? That's why I'm saying, and I know you agree too, is that's why next year is so big for him. Because now this is going to be his 3rd head coach, right? The first one was awful, but Doug Peterson for 3 years didn't work. Guy won a Super Bowl. I know it ended in Philly rough. I know this hasn't done well. People, the views on Doug Peterson are probably Doug Peterson might be one of the more lowly rated coaches that have won a Super Bowl of all time, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Like, I don't think people are going to look at Doug Peterson very fondly once this is all over. I think they'll kind of look at him as an average head coach, even though he took Nick Foles and beat Brady. But either way, we all know what happened. That's why this year is so important. Like, if Trevor goes out there this year and does what he did last year, or 2 years ago, because last year got hurt, so the numbers are skewed because he missed 10 or 7 games. But like, then what? If he goes out there this year and struggles, they miss the playoffs. What should give anybody any confidence he's all of a sudden going to turn it around at that point? It's going to be year 6.
If that's the case, it's tank for Manning. I mean, if he doesn't,
yeah,
you're going to have to start looking at some other options.
And I don't understand why they extended him. It didn't make any sense. Like, what did he do to extend him? What did he, other than beat Brandon Staley in the playoffs? Great. What did he do? That was more, and I'm not taking away, but that was more of the Chargers choking than the Jaguars coming back.
And, I've told, my friend that likes Jacksonville this a million times, where, to answer your question, I don't think it was about what Trevor Lawrence did for the extension. I think it was seeing all the quarterbacks that needed extensions and was just like, look, we don't want to get in a position where Trevor's demanding this because this guy got this. Let's go ahead and pay him early.
Yeah,
and they did, and it has not looked good on their end.
Yeah, it's looked terrible. It hasn't looked good at all. It'll be interesting. We got to give this GM coaching staff a chance, and you understand where they're coming from with these hires. But you have a lot of questions about the quarterback and the ceiling. His ceiling is getting lower and lower and lower every year, to the point where you don't really know if it can get any lower. It's kind of just where it's at. Certainly not getting any higher. So that's not good. Anyway, some star players that we think could get traded this season. So you got a list? A couple guys?
Yeah, I got a couple guys.
Yeah, I got a couple guys as well. Threw a couple on a list. So I guess if you want, you could start. First one, we'll kind of just go back and forth.
Yeah, I mean, we were just talking about Jacksonville, and I know the thing is build the roster around Trevor Lawrence, but I think Travis Etienne is one of those guys where I think it's his time. I think his time in Jacksonville is up, and I know his name was kind of shopped during the trade deadline this year. It was a possibility of him being in Dallas as a whole thing. Obviously, again, Dallas plays with 10 men and running backs aren't necessary, but just, the way Etienne has kind of almost feel like fell off a cliff and Tank Bigsby has picked it up. I honestly think Jacksonville looks to move on from him this year. And just, again, I know we're talking about building around Trevor Lawrence, but I think they need a fresh back maybe out of the draft, as I was saying. I think Etienne is out.
Yeah, I could see that. Last year, you started to hear some, questions around his future, especially with just the way they used, Tank Bigsby a lot. I could see them, looking down options in the draft, of course, like you mentioned. I agree. And I'll tell you what, ATN, it's unfortunate to kind of see what happened in Jacksonville. I mean, he was very promising the first 2 years, right? Teammates with Trevor Lawrence. And last year just fell off a cliff. I mean, the year prior, I think he had 11 touchdowns in 2023, back-to-back 1,000-yard seasons. And last year just didn't provide much of anything. So that was the problem with the Jaguars. Got to figure that out too, just their run game in general. They got to figure that out because it's not good. All right, I'm going to go big star here that could get traded. Tyreek Hill. I don't really know how to describe the whole situation. I think everybody knows, the Jets, they lose to the Jets. He goes into the post-game locker room and basically says, I've enjoyed my time here. I'm out. And then it's since then kind of walked back to his comments and clarified, and seems like he's going to stay. But I could still see it happening where they trade him, where he wants to go elsewhere. Tyreek Hill is so unpredictable. You really don't know what to expect from him. The Lions, or the Dolphins rather, are also just in a weird spot. You get a lot of the fan base is against keeping the GM and head coach and running it back. You feel like there needs to be a lot of changes. I think we talk about Trevor and the Jaguars hitting their peak. Feels like the Dolphins have kind of hit that as well. I mean, they are a wild. I mean, they've been hitting their peak, if we're being honest, for the last 20 years. But, either way, I could see Hill being traded. And I will tell you what. How does this sound? A Dallas Cowboys Tyreek Hill trade.
So, obviously Orlando's not that, far from Miami. We're probably talking about 3.5, maybe 4 hours if it's not that bad. If Tyreek Hill wants to trade to Dallas, I would personally call off work for a few days, drive to Miami, help him pack up, and drive him to Dallas. I would be ecstatic if Dallas somehow makes that happen. But here's why it won't happen. If he never mentioned it, like Dallas wasn't even a possibility of landing spot, then you can see it happening. But the fact Dallas and his name is attached, he's probably going to end up in Philly or Washington.
Yeah.
But a man can dream.
Yeah. That would be a very good use of gas.
Very.
It would be.
I wouldn't even be mad. I would max out the credit card, whatever it takes.
Yeah.
I don't care. Put 6,000 miles on the card. Like for Tyreek Hill, I would do that.
You remember Remember when Hill was close to getting traded to the Jets?
Yep.
Remember that? That was crazy. That stretch of time. Anyway, I could see that happening. And I could see Dallas maybe. Hey, they need a receiver. You gotta. The Cowboys got so many options. I mean, the next guy I'm gonna bring up, maybe you might bring him up before me, could get traded to Dallas. He's another receiver that I think could get traded. There's draft, free agency. Jerry Jones, man, you cannot sit this one out.
Well, so I didn't. So whoever, I'm actually curious what this next person you have. I know we talked about Kupp and Debo last week. So if it's not one of them, I'm kind of intrigued. But I actually do have another guy who not a receiver though that I would personally love to see in Dallas, and that's Nick Chubb. I think.
I like that.
Again, Cleveland, they got nothing. They got nothing. I think it's time. Denzel Ward and Nick Chubb, Myles Garrett, you've served your time in Cleveland. I think it's time you get out of there. But for Dallas's case, this is a guy that doesn't cost that much. Can't remember the number I looked up exactly, but I know it doesn't cost that much at all. Injury history, it's still Nick Chubb. And I think, obviously, with Zach Martin retiring, that offensive line is going to look a lot different. But if that offensive line can be even 70% of what it was with DeMarco Murray, you put Nick Chubb behind that, who I think still has a lot in the tank. Jerry, that answers a lot of your questions. You get a running back that's not super expensive, especially not $15 million worth, and that is proven, great runner, adds so much to the game as a rusher and a pass catcher. I think Dak will love that. So Nick Chubb, I would love to see him to start him, man.
Yeah, and I think too, just for Chubb, and I don't know if he would request a trade, but if they want it at this point in his career, and maybe he wants to stay in Cleveland his entire career, but with Myles Garrett leaving, I mean, when are they going to win? Like at this point in his career, you do start to wonder whether or not Chubb even wants to be there long term. Like, is he going to want to sit another 4 years there? Like, because I would say he's like middle to end of his prime.
Yeah.
He's probably got 3 good years left, maybe, because then he'd be 32. He's already had the really bad injuries. He's played 10 games the last 2 years. We all know it. So I think it'd be smart to give him to a contender. Like you said, ship him to Dallas. Dallas gets Chubb and Tyreek Hill. How about that for an offseason?
I would never complain ever again. Ever.
It'd be a lot better than when they just the long snapper. You go from maybe that's what maybe Jerry's on like this villain arc where he just realizes what he did wrong last year. Barkley and Derrick Henry were out there. He didn't. He said, nope, give me Zeke. And now he's like, you know what? Time to go all in.
Matt, I mean,
22
when
years
your
old.
two divisional rivals are like playing the NFC Championship, and one of them is with a rookie and the guy that was your defense coordinator that you let walk. Yeah, I'll be a little irritated too. So hopefully that does kind of light a match under them, and they decide to do something.
Yeah. It'll be interesting. I'm interested to see just what the Cowboys' plan is. How much draft, how much they go all in, trades, free agency. So that'll be interesting. But I do like the Chubb idea. Next player here, I'll bring up the receiver. You mentioned Debo, Cooper Kupp. Both those guys could totally see it, but we've talked a lot about them. I'm going to go DK Metcalf. There's been a lot of news, rumors swirling around potentially DK getting traded. Now, I could see DK. Perfect landing spot to me for DK. NFC East, but to the Commanders. You pair him with Terry McLaurin, give him Jaden Daniels. I would think if you're a Commanders fan, that's a home run. And I think from a Seattle perspective, I think they got JSN. Maybe try and get a little bit, I don't know, younger in a way at that position. Maybe look to draft somebody else. It feels like DK the last couple seasons in Seattle, more so last year, kind of took a back seat at times, and JSN was the main guy, the main focal point, right? Was just entering his third year now, right? I believe, right? It was year 2.
Yeah.
Yeah, because 2023 rookie year, 2024. So entering his, year 3. DK, on the other hand, entering year 7. I could see them going a little bit younger, even though DK is only 27. He's been in the league now since 2019. And I could see Washington bringing in DK, pairing him with Terry McLaurin. That could be scary. I'd also throw another team out there. They've gone after some of these other washed receivers. DK's not washed. Maybe this is the home run guy, but the Chiefs. They tried D-Hop. They tried Juju Smith-Schuster. Maybe they go DK. Could be an option. I think DK is the guy, though, out of the NFC West that maybe gets traded, or not maybe gets traded first, but should be getting more trade recognition than just what we're talking about with Debo and Kupp.
I actually had him on the list to Dallas. Possibly not. I'm going to throw one out there. This might be just utterly ridiculous and just completely just destroy my ball knowledge. But there's a team in the NFC that has one reliable receiver on the roster right now. That's Mr. Consistent. That's Mr. 1,000 yards every year. That's Mike Evans. Chris Godwin could be seeing his time out of Tampa. You got Jalen McMillan, but it's like, hey, do you want McMillan to be your number 2, and then behind him,
Yeah.
you got like a Sterling Shepard? Not really. Not from Baker had a great year, but it's just like, do we think Mike Evans and Jalen McMillan is getting us to the divisional or NFC championship, or do you throw a team like that in Tampa that DK probably wouldn't be opposed to, because you are playing with a Hall of Famer on the other side, a quarterback that has been playing great, and Tampa throws the ball a lot, and they would love DK. Like, it's a mismatch nightmare because you can't double neither one of them. DK Metcalf to Tampa will probably feed families, and I might actually join the Bucks fan base if that's the case. We can fire the cannons all day because I might join that fan base.
Yeah. I agree. That would be crazy. You think out of the 3 guys, DK, Cooper, Debo, you take DK?
And if we're talking from a Cowboy perspective.
Yeah. Cowboy, or just even in general. Out of the 3, I think it'd be DK would be the one out of the 3 of them, right?
I want to
From
say
the Cowboys, maybe Kupp to have that speed guy underneath to complement with CeeDee Lamb instead of the 2 vertical threats with Lamb and DK.
I
So
want to
maybe
say,
Cooper from a Cowboys perspective.
From that perspective, I still want to go DK because you can line him up in the slot.
Yeah.
Big body receiver, mix match nightmare. The only thing he has shown glimpses of kind of being a diva, but I kind of feel like it's to this point, and I know people bash CeeDee Lamb for it this year. Some of his frustration on the sideline and body language. I think that's exactly what they need is a guy who is not kind of with the foolishness and is going to speak up. And DK is that guy. So
Yeah.
I'm probably going to go DK.
Yeah. I could see that. I mean, there's a couple. I mean, the receiver. I feel like this is the year to get receivers. You got 3 guys in the trademark. You got a pretty good draft class. You got a couple good free agents. If you need a receiver, this is the year for you. I'll throw another one out there. Not really on my list, but just kind of thought of it. And I don't know if they would do this. It just, I don't know. It wouldn't make a ton of sense. But I mean, I guess it would make sense. I don't know. I don't think a new coach would do it. But we talked about it last year. Like, would the Saints move on from Kamara? Maybe. I don't see it.
I really thought.
It may be. I just think with Kellen Moore going over there, and we talked about this before last season about the possibility of maybe Kamara going to Dallas at the deadline. Like, we talked about that being the case. So it still stands now. My only thing with Kellen Moore, what he just did with Saquon in Philly, you feel like at least for year 1, he's going to want. Now, Kamara and Saquon are 2 different running backs.
Yeah.
They're complete opposite. Like, Kamara is very good as a pass catcher. Saquon's not. Saquon's an elite rusher. Kamara is not really that. He's never had 1,000 yards on the ground in his career. It's just not the type of guy he is. So maybe Kellen Moore looks for more of a, like, who knows? Maybe they, I don't know, move on from, maybe they take rather like a Genti and then move on from Kamara and go younger, whatever. Take Genti and then play, have Kamara here and then eventually move on, whatever. But again, I don't know what the Saints' plan is, how much they want to tear this roster down. I mean, there's not much tearing down to do. It's kind of already torn down. But Kamara's a name to look for. I mean, I feel like, last offseason we talked about it. This year we're talking about it. Something to look for at least,
Yeah.
To maybe get dealt.
That's not crazy. Honestly, I mean,
Yeah.
I know I said this last week. Luka got traded at 12:30 a.m. There's probably no move that can surprise me. And if the Saints kind of go into the offseason like, look, we're realistically not going to win. Let's go kind of Nick Chubb treatment. Let's go get him to a contender. They just extended him, but somebody will probably be willing to take on that contract, especially like a win now team.
Yeah. I agree. I'm just intrigued to what the Saints do. Like, what's their plan at quarterback? What's their plan at a wide receiver? How do they plan to build that? Kamara, obviously. It's interesting.
It's just right now, you rolling out for how it's looking. You're going to roll out with Spencer Rattler, probably, Alvin Kamara, Chris Olave. They're not beating nobody but the Cowboys in week 2 on the road. Like, that team is just like that roster. I think you said it perfectly. You can't tear down the roster that was never up to begin with.
Yeah, built up.
It's just bad.
Yeah, but we did provide hope. I think this was last week, right? Didn't we talk ourselves into Rattler, Kamara,
Samuel.
Olave? Was it Debo?
And Debo or Higgins.
Yeah, or Higgins, and then Tyler Warren in the draft.
Absolutely.
Yeah. We talked ourselves into, and now I'm going to talk myself into 10 wins.
Oh, actually, that kind of gets right into the next guy I was talking about possibly being traded. If we don't go Tyler Warren, why not Kyle Pitts? In division, this is the guy that just has not lived up to the expectation that we thought. So let's say Atlanta wants to move on. Yeah, absolutely. But from Kellen Moore, as we've seen in Dallas with Dalton Schultz, we've seen this year with Goddard and Calcaterra somewhat. He loves the tight ends. He finds a way to get tight ends involved. And I think Kyle Pitts just, again, it comes down to coaching. Atlanta, I don't think, is the place to do that. New Orleans is not that crazy.
Yeah, I could see that. And then maybe you go receiver in the draft, because if you don't want to spend big on a tight end or a wide receiver in free agency, you instead kind of spend bigger on the tight end and you go, I don't know, Olave, Ohio State teammate, Emeka Ibuka, Luther Burden, Tet McMillan's still there. It's a good receiver class. I've
It
done some more
is.
digging the last week or so,
It
doing a lot
is.
more digging just now in the draft as we kind of get going with it, over the next couple months. And there's some really promising receivers, especially in some scenarios too. Just from a Jet perspective, I've run through a lot of different scenarios. Like you trade back and the potential of some of these guys that you can get if you trade back to a 15 or a 16 is intriguing. Just the way the top 5, the top 10 could shake out.
Obviously, I want Luther Burden if Dallas can get him
Yeah.
at 12, but there's a guy probably goes second round that I could see in Dallas, and that's Ted Johnson. And they just hired an
I like
Oregon
him.
guy with some Oregon connection. I mean,
Yep.
Ted Johnson in the slot with CD. That's speed. That's a lot of speed.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think for both of us, like you kind of look at our teams that did nothing but give us pain and disaster throughout the year, and it's like it's not the fact of being excited about the team itself, but it's the fact you see all the talent in the draft, in free agency, and just like a guy here, like we can make some noise. It's just about if they actually do it. Now,
Yep.
your Jets, on the other hand, they make moves. They go out and get what they need to get. Sometimes it just doesn't work out. The other guy, though, he eats pudding and forget that you can sign players in March. So we'll see. But there's a lot of talent. I'm very excited about just off season in general.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, the Saints they'll do a couple different. They could do a couple different things, but yeah, they're just back. Ted Johnson, like him a lot. I also like Jalen Noel out of Iowa State. Done some more digging on him. He's a guy that I like. Similar to that, like that day 2 range. I think something that impressed me a lot of Noel. He's very big, deep threat. Like he was 4th, I think, in college football this last year in deep yards or something like that. He was above 600. And I don't know, just guys like that. Like those are the guys you want to take in day 2. Like those are the type of picks I think you want. A guy that has some of that explosiveness, maybe a little bit raw, but you bring him in, you develop him, and you figure some of the other things out. But just to have that explosiveness, has that deep threat. I think that's a lot of times what you want in some of these day 2 guys. Even a Torrey Horton out of Colorado State, I ranked around the same area as Trey Harris from Ole Miss, Tez Johnson, Noel, guys like that.
I'm going to throw another one at you, which very similar, but obviously not comparing the two. One, the Hall of Famer again, but Jaden Higgins from Iowa State, who the other Iowa State guy, both of their receivers were great this year, but kind of gives me some shades of Mike Evans a little bit. Like big body guy, can box you out, not super fast. Like they won't run by you, but they can run by you. Big hands, again, can use the body, physical route runner. I honestly wrote a draft piece on Higgins, and I personally like him. I think he will fit for 32 teams. I don't think there is a team that he won't work out on if, of course, he's in the right system.
Yeah. I'll tell you another one too. Small school, but a lot of upside. Nick Nash rather from San Jose State.
Spartans, yes.
Yeah.
San Jose State.
Slot. Primarily plays in the slot, but his contested catch ability is nasty. Tied for 4th last year in contested catches in college football, and he forced 30 missed tackles and would lead all of college football in slot catches from the slot and yards. Also as a deep ball threat. Like typically you don't necessarily think of a slot guy as that contested catch deep ball threat all the time. He is. That I think could pair well with a lot of different teams. You talk similar to like a guy like DK, not saying he's going to be DK Metcalf, but Dallas, for example, having DK, that big body physical guy in the slot, CD on the outside. Nick Nash could be that for somebody else. 6'3", not crazy big, but good size for slot. Very good contested catchability for a slot receiver. Could be an intriguing fit with a team that's got a really good number one. Whether that's Jets perspective, Garrett Wilson, CeeDee Lamb, whoever that might be. So
he actually had some crazy numbers this year that nobody
Yeah.
spoke about because
San Jose
obviously
State.
San
Yeah.
Jose State. But I mean, this guy was at you don't have to be your typical Bama or anybody, but if even if this guy was at like Auburn or Missouri, I know Luther Burden, of course, somewhere,
Yeah.
let's say tier A, like a tier A
He,
type of program. I'm
yeah.
tier B, I'm sorry, tier
Like a
B, where it's
Colorado
not your
State
yes,
or UCF or somebody like that.
he would probably be a first round grade if he
Yeah.
was somewhere like that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I'll
lots
throw
of
another
talent.
one. The reason why this guy pops up a lot for me was at the Rutgers Illinois game. Pat Bryant caught
Yes.
the game-winning touchdown after Greg Schiano botched a field goal situation. Only Rutgers, baby.
Yeah.
They're the only team that can find a way to botch it that badly. So another guy, if you're looking for a guy that can put the dagger in, maybe Pat Bryant.
Yeah.
So
yeah, it's a lot of talent.
Yeah, some exciting names. I just hope that if the Jets do take a guy day 2, it's finally the right guy because, geez, the history of the New York Jets taking receivers on day 2 and day 3 is maybe worse than their actual franchise history. That's saying something. It's not good, especially recently. Denzel Mims, Elijah Moore, Malachi Corley. Not very good.
Yeah, a lot of guys I was liking for Dallas, and it worked out that they didn't. So
yeah,
but it's all right. Your day 2 Jets kind of disaster is just Dallas drafting the guy from Michigan. It never works out.
yeah.
I mean, Jordan Lewis thing. It's the only one I can think of. So with that being said, Jerry Jones, don't take Mason Graham. Please don't take Mason Graham. It's not never works out, but we'll see.
Yeah, there's both of them. You're gonna have Kenneth Grant too, out of Michigan. Both guys. Jerry better stay away.
Please don't.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how the Jets too just navigate the defensive line. Do they go Mason Graham at 7 if he's there, or do they wait and get a guy like a TJ Sanders or a Tyleik Williams, who a lot of mock drafts that I've done have them there maybe at pick 42, but there has been some talks about, or just some, mocks that have Williams or TJ Sanders going in the first round. So feels like a top heavy defensive line cast. Like you got Grant, Graham, the guy out of Toledo, Darius Alexander, and then TJ Sanders, Tyleik Williams,
and everybody else.
Yeah. It feels like it's like a 4 or 5 top heavy. But yeah. Anyway. Oh, Deion Walker. You seen that guy at Kentucky?
Oh, yes. He's a freak.
That's crazy.
Doesn't he have 6 fingers? I think that's
Dude,
he's a freak.
You see his length, 6'6". He's crazy. I would whoever takes him gotta be kind of watching him, seeing what he does in the NFL. He's an intriguing prospect. Just his build is wild. Some of his Senior Bowl stuff, he was dominating some of the one-on-one reps with the offensive line. So, anyway, any closing thoughts? Anything else to add?
No, hope we're getting everybody excited. Again, Combine is this week, so we may shoot in the middle of the Combine, kind of depending on what days we're both free. But for those who do watch, look into some of the guys if you haven't, especially like Nick Nash. And we'll catch you next week.
Yeah, definitely. We'll be back. Combine opens up Thursday.
Thursday.
27th through the Sunday. So we'll be here either way, Saturday, Sunday. But we'll have it either way. We'll obviously recap Thursday, Friday, of course, and depending on when we record Saturday or Sunday, we'll talk about those days. GMs, head coaches will speak. So if there's anything that comes out of that, we'll discuss it. Any other rumors, we'll talk about it. But Combine's a big step. Combine's like these 2 weeks from the Super Bowl are dead. Combine now starts. Now after the Combine, you're into March, and it's boom. It's like 10 days from free agency. Things start to pick up a little bit. So kind of got past like the 2 week dead park before things start to pick up for about the next couple weeks. with the first wave of free agency always being action packed. So we'll talk to you guys next week. As always, thank you so much for joining us, and see you next time.